Hey everybody, welcome to this TrendSpider Sunday chart show. We have special guest Arun Chopra with us, and he is with FusionPointCapital.com, the founder, and a CMT as well, CFA as well, right, Arun?
Yeah, yep, both.
All of them. All right, I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and being on the show. And I will hand it off to you here in a second once I just go through a couple things that we always go through, including the disclaimer. We're really going to go over a couple different things, a lot of different case studies, a lot of ways that Arun uses TrendSpider in his analysis and kind of complements what he's already been doing in his analysis for quite some time, especially with raindrops and multi-timeframe analysis. But that does not mean these are buy or sell signals. These are really just ways to kind of show you guys how to use the platform, different features, case studies, all of that fun stuff. Our vision, for those that have not heard this part of the presentation before, we are a charting platform at the base, really aim to innovate both the process and the mindset of technical analysis in the way we really look at volume and price action for raindrops, as well as long-term and short-term price action with multi-timeframe analysis. And those are the two key things we'll be focusing on today. The end goal is to really build the most integrated all-in-one trading platform out there for both retail and professional traders. And once we get brokerage integration at some point in 2020, we hope that goal will be fulfilled. Some of the main functionality that we do have on the platform, back testing, automated technical analysis to complement what you're doing by hand, proprietary indicators such as the anchored VWAP from Alpha Trends, multi-timeframe analysis, which is something we'll be focusing on a lot today, cloud-based alerts where you're able to go and create an alert based on a condition that you're watching, such as the MACD and the RSI breaking with our multi-factor alerts, or just price action breaking through a moving average with our upper indicator alerts. And those are just the regular alerts where you can create sensitivity around those areas. And lastly, the raindrops, and that's something we'll be also focusing on a lot. And that is a way to innovate how you look at volume and price within a specific period. So before I hand it off to Arun, where he really starts to jump into his philosophy and all that good stuff, I do want to just quickly go over what the raindrop is, so we have a little bit of a background here. The raindrop is pretty much two things. At the first layer, it's essentially a bar chart, except instead of your open being the left bar and your right side being the closed bar, this is actually your volume weighted average price for the first half of the period, whether that's the daily candle you're looking at or the 10-minute. And then this is the volume weighted average price for the second half of the period. So rather than looking at open and close, you're really looking at what's really driving price, and that's volume. And then the second layer is the volume profile on each side of the chart. So here you can see the volume profile on the left is telling us a lot of that volume during the beginning of the day, if this is a daily chart, was focused at the bottom of the range. And as the day progressed, you can see a lot of that volume starting to kick in during the second half of the day, actually driving prices up. So this is really a way to visualize volume flowing throughout a particular period. And so there's three different colors. You've got the green one, which we just went over, when the volume weighted average price is higher during the second half of the period than the first. You've got your neutral raindrop, and based on today's survey that we did, I think we're going to have to rename this a purple raindrop. But the neutral raindrop is your purple, which is essentially when the volume weighted average price is equal on both sides, and that's what we call like a true volume doji. The bearish raindrop, which is red, is going to be just opposite of the bullish, where your second period VWAP is lower than the first. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Arun to get this party started.
All right. Thank you. Definitely. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
We're good.
All right. Perfect. So, let me start. I think just kind of a little bit about myself, and then I wanted to share kind of how I'm using TrendSpider. And I was really happy to do this because, TrendSpider is one of the newer tools that I've incorporated. The longer you do this, you kind of get not stuck in your ways, but it's rare to find something new. And so when TrendSpider came along, I was really happy to incorporate it. I want to share, how that comes into my approach. I'll talk a little bit about myself first. I was born and raised in California. Yeah, I did the CFA, the CMT. I did my MBA at Stern, and I started as an analyst. Over the years, obviously that's changed. Now I'm mostly a private investor. I swing and position trade. My time frames are longer than most people. I would think, 3 months, 2 years. Sometimes it really depends. This has been a unique market. For those who know some of my stuff, I've done a couple films as well. And I call myself a behavioralist because of really the technical approach as well. And I'll share some of that today. I do run Fusion Point, of course, which, we have tactical PMs, advisors, individual investors. It is open to everybody now. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on my tools, but I really want to get into how I use TrendSpider more than anything else. I split my time between Palo Alto and New York. So I was, again, at Stern for a while. So that's kind of home, or PA's home. You can find me at Fusion Point Capital, and the website has more on me, et cetera. So you're welcome to look there. The agenda, kind of what I wanted to go over was, again, my approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about false patterns because, I do a lot of that stuff. And then Raindrops, how I use them, multi-timeframe, and then the blue doji, which I guess will be the purple one. There's some cool stuff there that I've come across that's helped me. So I'll jump into that towards the tail end. Just a little bit about Fusion, what I do. It used to be kind of combining fundamentals and technicals, but it's really branched out now into the behavioral side. And so I think of it as combining, the left and the right side of the brain. And I'm gonna skip the macro side and just kind of focus on stock fundamentals today, the factor models I use, behavioral finance, which is a very big piece now of what I'm doing, and then the business dynamics. And so if you think about the right side of the brain, crowd psychology, human emotion, those things, and then if you go to business dynamics, there's a big thing there too in terms of narratives. One person can be so bullish while somebody else can be so bearish with very similar narratives. So I think that that's a place where, technicals help, Raindrops have helped, and just having an overall comprehensive approach. I'll skip through the services and tools. You're welcome to look at that, but active is sort of me. And then the scans and the algo is where everything is sort of driven from. And my scans, I run about 12 different strategies. That gets me down to about 200 to 300 stocks. And that really determines what I'm going to trade or invest in, and it really depends on time frames. And the algo is new. The algo is a behavioral product, and that thing is basically designed to sort of pick off, highs and lows, and it looks for capitulation on the upside and the downside. I'm going to show you how Raindrops, I've even incorporated that now with the algo. It's new. I'll share more of that as we go. I don't want to spend too much time on each one because I do want to show the examples first. And then just quickly on my single stock approach, because this is what was really big for me over the years was, I started I think I did my CMT first. I can't remember now, but I was always doing fundamentals too. And I kind of was born and just sort of raised in markets. So it was never a thought of, what's the correct way. It was always a search for what works and experience. And so for now what I'm doing is essentially fundamentals first. I really go through my scans. It drives my ideas. I then do look at the why, which is a lot about the story of the stock, whatever I can find on it that's more behavioral. And then the when. And the when is what I want to show today, is really that price action, human behavior, determining when to act. And I will jump ahead to the models as well. So, as I go to the fundamentals, how do I find something? And that is the scans. Okay, so the scans themselves, I'll just show you very quickly, what are factors, because I think there are so many ways to approach a stock. And you hear, is it a Buffett strategy? Is it a, Greenblatt? What are you doing? And so for me, what I've done is I've taken a bunch of different factors and I've turned them into business models, basically. And some are very intuitive, something that's growing revenue very fast. It's very simple to understand. Others are a little bit more complex or are more unique to what I'm doing. I can just show you how I go through things, but it's growth and quality strategies. For those of you who've used factors, growth and quality, there's custom that is just short squeezes, things I've learned over the years, and then my value ones. And just to give you an example of it, we added balance sheet strength recently. And, for all markets, again, I know people who are learning the charts. I know people who do deep value stuff. And for me, combining it is so important, but you can really calibrate what you're trading in any given market by using some of these factor models. So again, for me, if I don't feel comfortable with the market, I might go to a balance sheet stock. If I feel very comfortable, I might take something that's growing revenue fast. Those are some of the calculations that come in before I even look at a chart often. And I'll just show you what else I think it put. Yeah, that's just how the scans are built. They're relatively robust. And again, if you've never seen it, you can kind of see how stocks tend to correlate with certain factors. And so Facebook with revenue growth, Southwest with ROEs, you can go through a lot of variations as to why that is. But the bottom line is I tend to know why I'm trading something, at least broadly speaking, before I get down to the charts. Let me just jump ahead. This is kind of the takeaway, is that I do care a lot about what I'm technically trading. So that's just kind of the easiest way to say it. And I do think that's important. That has been a big shift for me over the course of the last, I don't know, let's call it 8 years. Going into the technicals though, and this is kind of where, the real actionable stuff kind of comes in, is, false patterns in the technical approach. So I use a multi-time frame approach. I use candles, patterns, of course, and then behavioral. And if we're talking about false patterns, some of you may have seen some of these posts in the past, but, you can go back to even, this is kind of interesting, but in the 30s, here's a breakdown, what we would call support break, and then it just rips the other way. And here's some examples. Again, I posted this recently where, the textbook will tell you to sell that, and instead it breaks the other way. But it's not really that simple, right? There's actually a lot more going on under the hood. And I'll just show you very quickly how that same example, if you take trading lows, does hold support. And so that kind of opens the door into the conversation of why candles, why raindrops, and how I think about things in general. And so I just want to show you how I started to incorporate all of that with an actual example. Okay, so now I'll kind of just bring it all back around. And one example of something recently, I think this was one of my larger positions in the year, and I'm still in it. But I will tell you that CGNX is basically was a rocket stock. So the more you know the models, the more you kind of understand the factors you're working with. And I wanted to find something that was, a former high flyer that was beaten up, particularly as the market was going nowhere. And you can see a very simple pattern on here. It's a nice base, a lot of divergences. There's a squeeze, there's volume, all the things you look for. But the question is, what do you do? And so when I entered this here, the new approach, or the additional thing that TrendSpider really helps me with, is if you go and start to drill down under the hood, what I'll do is I'll bring it up on TrendSpider, but I want to show you this actual area here as I'm entering in this right part of the base. There's a lot of volatility in here. There was earnings and it comes back. And if we go to TrendSpider itself, what you'll find during that base is the ability to actually look inside the candles. And so here are those candles. So the way I set it up is I've got my left side, which is more traditional, and I've got my right side that's the actual raindrops. Okay. And so now I've already gone down this road of I've found a fundamental name I want. I've gone through a multi-time frame approach. I do have an algo signal, or I did at the time have an algo signal on the stock suggesting that it had been flushed out. And now I'm just looking to enter. And so here's what looks in candle work just to be some regular green candles. And the more you do this, you find that, it doesn't confirm the way you always want. And so when you swing over to the actual raindrops, this is what really helped me, was you can see these massive pushes off of those lows, and that all the volume actually happened in the upper end of those trading ranges. And in fact, that ended up being the absolute low for the name. Now, it's run okay. There's been a lot of better stocks out there, but it's certainly, interestingly enough, is still like a 30-40% run. And if you really want to get down to the details, they're actually declining in revenue, and they're stuck in China, and all the trade and all this stuff is going on, and it's still up. And so that's really the power of being comprehensive. I'll show you a few more examples that I have in general, just that goes beyond, entering. I'll show you, that's CGNX. I'm going to show you IPO now. So this is something we did in real time too. And again, as you're always trying to figure out what edge do you have, here's a broadening top, but how many broadening tops have we seen break the other way? And again, all you have to do is go back to any example like this, and I'm sure you've all been there, where something looks like it's going to break and it doesn't. And so what are our advantages? And again, as you go through the candles here, I will show you with IPO. This is one of my favorite examples. And one of the earlier trades I made with this is, you could see, here's your right shoulder, and then take a look at all the raindrops. There was a lot of red in here, but this is just noise. It doesn't tell you much. And you can see all the volume bars that are pushing to the downside. So all the raindrops actually have the volume of the downside well before the breakdown. And again, I don't want to, throw everything out there, other than to say, if you're thinking about this, the next step, what you can do is actually say, okay, it looks like IPO is going to roll, and what are the single stocks that are going to get hit from that too? And I believe, I have to go back and look, but I believe this is when Beyond rolled, certainly when Lyft and Uber rolled. And it just gives you an insight into, okay, if this is going to go, what might go next? And I'll show you how that played in real time actually in 2019. So the next wave of this was the software top. And so again, another thing that we saw coming, and I was certainly on top of it, but faced with the same challenge you're always faced with, which is, sure, this is an expensive name and the trend is broken. But if you had seen some of the trades, anyone who's followed me for a while, you'll see many trend breaks from 17, maybe more like 18, that just got demolished. And a lot of that has changed. And so nowadays I see a trend break and I'm a lot more cautious. And so how do you know what to do here? And I want to just show you the OKTA candles inside versus the raindrops at the very top. So this is that actual top in OKTA. It had broadened out, and you can see it again here. Very simply here is it would broaden, trend had broken. We know it's trading expensive, but if you think that that's all that matters, over time, you're going to, you'll see that that's just not true. I mean, this could have looked like Shopify. Frankly, it did look like Shopify about a month ago or whatever it was on the weekly, and it ripped all the way back to almost 400. So it just gives you another piece of sort of information that you can work with. And I'll show you, here's what it looked like, is here's a big engulfing candle on OKTA at the top. In the past, I would have said, okay, that's enough to be actionable. And over time, you will find that that just doesn't tend to always work. And it was really just helpful. And you could see the real candle, or basically the raindrop, and what I consider to be the real action inside that candle. And here it is right here, where the entire pressures to the downside. And so that then leads, to a lower move, which again, it's not always going to be that way, but it is certainly helpful once, for me at least, once I'm at that actionable moment. It's just a quick check. And that's literally why I leave my screen this way. I for the most part, I have it with the regulars on one side and the rains on the other, and I just kind of go back and forth. And I will now, sort of show you that piece of it, where the last thing basically, that I'm doing now is adding in multi-timeframe. And so let me take one step back to my layout, and I'll just show you one other piece of this, which is, and when this was, so between raindrops and this is basically the two sort of my favorite parts of it, which is being able to overlay two time frames on one chart. So why don't we do it here? I have it here. Let me do it. So yeah, so this is another good example. So now after OKTA basically had rolled, all right, what you have is a stock that's broken down, and it's a high volatile name, it's a high beta name, all that stuff, and it's falling. And one of the things that, over the years, again, stuff you kind of pick up is, if you look at the right-hand side, I have the 200-day moving average on here, okay, in green. And how many times have you said, oh, it breaks the 200 and they're supposed to sell it, or don't buy it below the 200, and all these different rules? And instead, that was actually the most actionable moment in these names. What you find is you're always looking for something that nobody else is kind of doing on that time frame that might make sense. And at least for me, historically, that has been switching to a weekly chart. And so if you use a 50-week moving average, which is not the same as a 200-day, we used to actually just kind of recalculate it and lay them both down as on the same chart, like on stock charts. The beauty is now you got them both right here. And so this is a 50-week with the 200-day above it. And sure enough, the 50-week is like just absolute perfection. It just breaks below and holds the 50. Now, again, not always going to be the case, but one of the things that I found, especially with the higher volatile stuff, is these hidden weekly levels. That's also why I have a Bollinger that is a weekly Bollinger behind the daily price chart. And I don't have too many examples of that today, but I will say that that's something that I am working with. But one of the cool things, as you can imagine, is you break these daily levels. Another thing that I'm looking on building on top of this is, okay, you break a daily 200-day. Sometimes you'll see this where volume surges out. Effectively, everybody's being taken out because they're all set up in the same place. And it's that 50-week that holds. If you dig even a little deeper onto the right-hand side here, what you will find is that the raindrops as well are pretty constructive too. So there's a blue, I believe, here. But as you dig deeper, here's one that pushes right off the low. There's a lot you can do there, and I'm still learning as I go, but I will tell you that it is a lot more confidence building when you see a weekly level hold and a solid raindrop, or a strong sort of hammer type of raindrop. So that's the multi-time frame piece. And then the last example I want to show you is the, sorry. Yeah, so the last example is the blue dojis. So let me just see if you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy. Okay, cool. So the last example is the blue dojis, and I want to show you this from a couple actual trades that we made in 20. This is now this goes all the way back to January, which is crazy. But so at the time I posted this XHB on the right hand side, and what you've got is just a very classic, base reversal, right? And if you look here on the left hand side, we now know what happened. There's a lot to be said about this, and I'll show you two algo examples at the end. But again, in the past, it would be algo, fundamental stock, or sector, algo, and then go. And if you look now, what's really cool is take a look at XHB here on the right, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like with the raindrops on the inside. So here's your same setup, and take a look at this. We had 4 blue or purple raindrops inside of this base before the breakout, which actually obviously turned into a much, much bigger move. So what I'm starting to work with now, and I'll show you one last thing on the algo, which is what I'm working with now is how blue raindrops can kind of impact balance in the market. Again, the algo is designed to catch, panic. And this is an actual example that we had Autodesk. This is the algo section. I kind of post where they're firing. It had fired here, bounced, and Autodesk, fundamentally, we could go on and on, but it is in one of the scans, of course. And as it pulled back into here, I just want to show you why I posted this when I did. And let me show you here. So if we go to ADSK. All right, so here's where my algo ended up firing on this big capitulation candle, basically. Comes back, pulls back, and on this pullback, what you'll find is, again, more of the same sort of raindrops. Again, this is one on the, look at this capitulation candle versus the volume. It's actually all in the upper end. And then as you look at when I posted that, part of the reason was that I knew my algo had fired. I knew this was a quality name. And then I had another solid sort of, push to the upside on volumes inside of a trade. And so if you were to draw these as hammers, let's just say theoretically, it's not going to be the same because of the volume. But the point is that the lows of basically all this accumulation never broke. And not only that, but it absolutely flew from that moment on. And so for me, all of that kind of confirms, that level. I don't have an exact set of rules yet, but I could tell you that some of the things that I'm definitely using, as you saw, where's the volume occurring at these inflection candles? If something's basing, you could see there's a bunch of purple raindrops in here too. And again, XHB for me was one of the bigger ones because that XHB definitely had, you could just see it. And look, as people are dumping out after a big decline, I mean, this was a massive decline. So you could see 4 blue or purple raindrops in this pattern, even before we're even talking about the right shoulder. So once the right shoulder came along, if you've got a bunch of balanced candles here, regardless of the algo, regardless of everything else, and you're down something like 15 or 20, 30% from the highs to lows, it is suggesting a change. And again, then the cool thing is obviously you can manage everything from here. The risk on this was like $1, right? And the run ended up being, whatever, $10 plus. So anyways, that's basically how I've incorporated it. There's a fair amount of algo examples I could go through, but I think I just wanted to share that, of all the things I've used over the years, and everything is as particular as I am now, which is literally my scans, the algorithm, and a chart. To be able to find that one extra piece has been very helpful. And I can tell you, we used to go back and try to figure out where volume occurred during a day. And if you didn't do it that day, you lost that intraday data. And so now you could just pull it up. And so, for me, that's kind of where I am with it. I think in the next iteration will be to incorporate alerts and particularly things like multi-time frame breaks, volume spikes, alert me on something like that. So that's my next sort of phase with it. But yeah, for now, that's basically how I'm incorporating it. And it is, as of this point, I mean, it's almost become the last check before an entry.
I love it. Well, that was really good stuff. And it's kind of like one of those things that's still in research mode. Right when we came out with them, I really wanted to jump in and kind of see how I could use them as well. And it's just cool to see how each individual kind of user can use them in a different way. So you've got, blue raindrops, which are huge. One thing that I'm going to touch on here shortly, I'm just going to go back to my screen, is just kind of to visualize some volume flow. So this is a really cool example on Netflix, and this actually happened this week. And so, we had this really big ascending kind of wedge forming here, and we finally broke through this resistance. And if you were just looking at a regular candle, you would have, it was kind of iffy there, right? There was a big wick here. It kind of looked like sellers came in, and anyone that did buy into this just got sold into. But you can see here, all of that supply that was getting dumped onto the market was actually being absorbed at these higher prices, even though we closed barely above this line. So this is a way you can really kind of see where that volume is located within the range, rather than just, turning on the volume bar and essentially just seeing, okay, well, yeah, there is, there was a big piece of volume there, but where was that volume and how was it interacting? And so that's something that the raindrop really gives you the ability to do. One other cool example, this is to add to the blue raindrop, or the purple raindrop. I guess that's what we're calling it now after the survey. But this is another example with Apple, right? We had this ascending wedge breakout. You had a lot of that volume near the top of the range breaking out here. So that was a nice confirmation. And then you had this 2-day impulse move up. Notice you've got that blue raindrop forming and how the price is now kind of stalling here. So there's a lot of the time where you'll have these blue raindrops form after a big move to the upside. And then that can kind of be either one, a signal that, there could be some profit taking with a pullback, maybe a gap fill, or just a pause in the overall trend. Because notice here, blue raindrops, or at least the last few that we've seen, there hasn't been a ton, but notice this was the same thing. You had a big move up, blue raindrop formed, and then you just had your next leg up. So Bitcoin's another really cool example of that, where, the blue raindrop can sometimes just kind of be the confirmation of the next leg to the upside. So that is one example. Another example that I wanted to go over is Facebook. Facebook is one of my favorite examples here, because you've got a really cool case study of this previous area of resistance, which would now be support after the recent breakout. But you can see here, when we finally topped out, this was a pretty strong area of resistance when we tried to break to the upside. And notice that there was really no volume at all within this range up here. And so that told us very quickly that there wasn't a lot of conviction by the buyers above this area. Compare that to the last few days of this previous week, and you'll see something opposite. You'll see the volume is actually confirming above the resistance line, which before it was not. And then when you did pull back here, you were just testing this previous resistance, now acting as support. And then you had a lot of that volume continue near the top of the range into the second half of Friday. So another kind of cool example to add to Arun's research and just kind of the overall research of raindrops. So if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out in the chat and ask them. I'm going to go over maybe one or two more examples, and then we'll kind of end the show if there's no requests or anything like that. So another example that I did want to go over here is IWM. We had a very, very similar kind of thing happen here, where IWM was one of the few that was looking decent into the midweek. SPY was really kind of stuck at the 1.618 extension. However, IWM was showing us that, there was definitely some volume above this area. And then you had your 2-day impulse move up to test this 1.618 area. So, these are just really a great way to see where that volume is and how it's kind of flowing throughout either the daily candle. The 10-minute candle is the lowest candle that we can go to, but I'm really hoping at some point in 2020, we will have the ability to dive deeper into, let's say, the weekly or the monthly candle on the raindrop, especially for those that are swing trading and not necessarily having to look at the shorter term candles. Maybe you want to look at the overall month, the overall week, and see where that volume's located. Arun, I have a question, just how much of your analysis is based on, daily versus weekly versus monthly? What would you, kind of rate those 3 time frames as kind of most important, or least important?
Yeah, I think a little bit of it depends on, is this more of a hold or a trade? But I think almost everything I take, I do know where the weeklies are.
Mm-hmm.
I think the weekly raindrops will be so helpful as well. The weeklies are kind of where it's similar to that moving average example, right? So you kind of know where they are, even if it's price, not moving average.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't think of the last thing I probably entered without knowing where the weeklies at least were. But once it gets moving, like in fact, the example you just had now of the blue raindrops, post the gap up, like LVS, a couple other names I've been in that have been flagging, you get those blue raindrops in there. And so that at that point, the weekly, all it means to me is that, is it on a breakout or something? Because then you say, okay, the weekly's in good shape, the daily's starting to move, maybe we're being marked up. And if we're flagging and we're doing a purple raindrop, at some point you say, this is just a pause and we're going a lot higher. And so it all kind of comes together that way. Whereas a lot of people might get shaken out or bored or something like that.
Yeah.
And I would add one other thing too. Imagine in that weekly, you've got solid raindrops too, prior to the daily move. If you knew that, that would probably help say, okay, I'm done with this one.
Yep. No, I completely get it. And this is another cool example of the blue raindrop too, where you had a nice move up. Literally from October 2nd, you start at 173. We ended right around 203 with a blue raindrop, right at this previous resistance. And then you had a 2-day pullback, pretty hard pullback from around 200 all the way down to 195. So quite a few handles for the options traders. But, you can see once we finally kind of broke down again, we found support right on this area. And so the way I would have drawn this, was essentially, connecting my point here, connecting this previous area down here, and then you would have seen this blue raindrop forming right on support. And then notice how in the last week or so, you've got a move from 194 all the way up to around 206 after that blue raindrop on support. So these are definitely something to watch around hard or areas of support that have definitely been a rejection area in the past, especially something like this where it was rejected really hard. And so you've got this retest after such a big move up. Naturally a blue raindrop after that kind of move is something to look at, possibly for a little bit of just deflation of the balloon, if you will. One other cool example that I wanted to show, actually, let's say we have a couple questions. Dan asks, Arun, do you use volume by price at all, or volume by file?
I don't. I'm aware of it. I'll put it that way, but I don't. One of the things I get questions a lot. So you'd be surprised how simple some of my layouts really are. Because I will say this about it is, I think when you go down to the portfolio structure side, which obviously we're not, discussing, but at that point you say, okay, I've got a weekly chart, I got an algo signal, I got a rocket stock. Where am I trying to enter this? But yes, it's just not on my layouts as much as you would think. But the more I'm using the raindrops now, volume is coming back into my mindset a lot more than it used to be. So it's not laid out there. But I'm not necessarily obviously I wouldn't say against it. It's just more a lot of the slippage that comes across of trading. I think I protect myself through the portfolio structure. So I'll have a wider stop. I'll have a weekly level. and I'll have a fundamental name, and that tends to offset, because I feel like that's as variable as you might have a good volume profile and it still may not work. So, but yeah, so that I would just say that, I think.
Okay. Well, this is an example on Shop over the last week or so. And this is something that's unique to TrendSpider, where you can actually move your start date for the volume profile to kind of anchor it, such as anchoring the volume weighted average price from Alpha Trends anchored VWAP. But you can essentially move this. And one thing that I was taught by Brian Shannon was you want to kind of anchor stuff from a status quo changing point, whether that's a reversal point, whether that's an earnings date. So for me, I've liked to kind of anchor the volume profile from these bottoming points or these topping out points. And a cool example of this was last week, where you could see a ton of the volume here was really aggregating right around 370, 372 region. And then you had that really big move up because, all of that, any supply that was available pretty much dried up, and any demand that came in just drove the price up. And so, I like to use this as kind of like almost like a base, right? You've got this volume almost creating this area for price to kind of jump to the next level, if you will. So notice how I move this. If I move this, let's say, to the move here, you can see now a lot of that volume is actually holding here from this December 4th kind of impulse move up. So just a really cool example of using another kind of form of the volume profile, not just on the candle with raindrops, but actually anchoring it from certain points. How do we anchor the profile? So when you go to volume by price, you just go to indicators. And so you'll go to, type in volume by price, and it will pop up under your indicator list. And so you can turn it on or off right here. You can also change this. So if you did want to add the point of control or the volume weighted average price, you can also see that on here as well. So that, to me, just makes the chart a little noisy, but you can add those lines if you'd like. Can we review? We won't be able to review all of these, but let's take a look at, let's do V and check out what Visa has to show on the daily raindrop. Any thoughts on V, Arun? Oh, wow. Nice raindrop breakout here. Oh man, this is a great kind of textbook example here of a balloon, or kind of just a breakout with volume backing it, right? So we had this kind of symmetrical triangle forming. You had the breakout, you had the confirmation of volume, you had your next move up, you had a retest almost perfectly, and now you've got your continuation of the breakout here with quite a nice, what I would call a balloon breakout here. And notice that you've got this previous resistance kind of 4 days in a row here, and then you finally have got a nice, candle here breaking out through this horizontal level, kind of continuing the next leg up. So that would be Visa. Any thoughts on that, Arun?
I have to look. I was gonna say, I think a lot of these are like in squeeze. They're all breaking out of like weekly. Yeah. So I mean, I noticed that this weekend. I didn't have a ton of time, but I started looking. I think I do use the squeeze a fair amount, mostly on weeklies. And I just think you're seeing that all over. So, in these conditions, depending on your time frames, these are kind of those opportunities where things are weekly squeeze firing. Once you get down to the dailies and the candles, you have a lot of tailwind. The bigger issue, and part of the problem I have at times, is by combining fundamentals, you can get discouraged when you do just the numbers on them. But I mean, yeah, just look at this stuff. And you're seeing that in everywhere. I mean, look at XLY, look at the Dow, there's so much out there like this now. So, it becomes one big trade in many ways.
Yep. Kind of just a confluence of everything moving up together. One other example I wanted to do was Verizon. This is kind of a cool example of a nice breakout here on the raindrop. You can see, just a ton of volume supporting the price above this previous high here. And then if you look at this monthly candle, it's definitely kind of starting its next journey, possibly higher. So As Arun mentioned, it just looks like, you can almost pull up any chart and put it on the monthly or the weekly, and you're going to see a very similar story. I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Let's see if Dan just mentioned something. Well, I think that is all we have. One thing that I did want to really highlight here is the scanner is almost coming available dash, there. So that is going to make everything a lot easier. So let's say that you have a set of conditions that you like to create alerts for. You'll now be able to scan the entire S&P 500 for those criteria and get the results within seconds. So that is something that we are really excited about. And to kind of add to that, we do have the holiday sale coming up. So I guess it's live now. We started a little bit early. And if you do want to check that out, just go to the link that I provided in the chat here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. That's 40% off annual, 25% off monthly. And if you do want to check it out, let's say you start a free trial and you want a one-on-one demo or want to extend your trial, just let us know and we're happy to do that. But the biggest thing is really a huge thank you to Arun for joining us. I know it is really late your time right now, so I don't want to keep you up any longer, but this has just been really educational for myself, and I hope everyone else in the chat. And we really appreciate your time jumping on here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Honestly, it is, the hours are crazy, but it's fun. And like I said, I couldn't think of a better group. You guys are awesome, and incorporating something new like this, it has big meaning for me because I've tried a lot of things over the years and kind of have an approach. So I'm more than happy to do it, and I'm excited to see what comes in the future too. So definitely very appreciative on my end as well.
Well, thank you so much. And we also have a volume webinar coming up on the CMTA website in the next week or two. So if you want to check that out, for the CMT Association with Brian, we're going to be doing a webinar kind of mixing the anchored volume weighted average price with the volume profile and the raindrops. So we're going to continue trying to research and find different ways to utilize these things, and can't wait for what 2020 has to offer. And we will not stop innovating and just making the platform as good as it can be. So thank you everyone again for joining. I think we did have a question about Forex. I wasn't able to get to that. But if you do want to check out an example of this on Forex VJ, definitely check out our webinar that we did with Johan a few weeks back. You can go on our blog and check that out. And that is all we have. Thank you everyone again for joining. Arun, get yourself some sleep. I know and happy trading into the short week.
Definitely. No, thanks a lot. I will, and thank you guys very much.
All right, you're very welcome. Everyone have a great Sunday and happy holidays and a happy New Year. Thanks.